Woman after paying for a burger for an elderly man, the McDonald's manager fires her. But 2 hours later, everyone. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon at the McDonald's on the corner of East 4th Street and Main. Rachel had been working the cash register for nearly 6 months, juggling college classes, this part-time job, and her dream of one day owning her own small restaurant. She was young, determined, and a little bit too kind-hearted for the fast-paced world of fast food, something her manager, Greg, often reminded her of. "Remember, Rachel," he'd say with a pointed look, "we're here to make money, not friends." Rachel would smile and nod, the words sliding off her like water. She didn't always agree with Greg's approach, but she knew better than to argue. Most days, she kept her head down, taking orders with a friendly smile, moving quickly to keep the line flowing, and making sure customers had everything they needed before moving on to the next. But today was different. Just after lunch, an elderly man entered the restaurant. He looked tired, his clothes worn and faded, and Rachel could see the lines of exhaustion etched into his face. He shuffled slowly to the counter, counting out a few crumpled dollar bills and loose change from his pocket. "Welcome to McDonald's. What can I get for you today?" Rachel greeted him with her usual warmth. The man hesitated, looking at the menu with an expression that mixed hunger and disappointment. "Could I get just a small coffee, please?" Rachel glanced at the change he'd placed on the counter. It wasn't even enough for a small coffee. Her heart ached for him as he stood there, shuffling nervously, clearly embarrassed. She hesitated, glancing around to see if anyone was watching. "How about a burger with that coffee?" she asked, her voice low and gentle. The man looked up, surprised. "Oh no, miss. I don't have enough." "Don't worry about it," Rachel whispered with a small smile. "It's on me." He tried to protest, but she quickly rang up the order, pulling out a few dollars from her own wallet. As she handed him the burger and coffee, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, miss. You don't know what this means to me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Rachel smiled, feeling a warmth that made the long hours and minimum wage worth it. She knew she was bending the rules, but she couldn't bring herself to care. However, as the man took his seat in the corner, savoring each bite of the burger, Rachel noticed Greg watching her from the doorway to the kitchen. His face was a storm of disapproval. "Rachel, a word," he called out, his tone sharp. Rachel's heart sank as she followed him into the back, away from the prying eyes of customers. "What do you think you're doing?" Greg demanded, crossing his arms. I was just helping him out," Rachel stammered, feeling a wave of defensiveness rise within her. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days. "This is a business, Rachel, not a charity. You don't get to give away food for free," Greg said, his voice icy. "But it was just a burger. I paid for it myself," she protested. "That's not the point," Greg snapped. "You're here to follow orders, not make your own rules. And if you can't do that, maybe this isn't the place for you." Rachel felt her cheeks flush with anger and humiliation. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. She'd simply tried to help someone in need, and now her job was on the line. Are you firing me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Greg's expression didn't soften. "Yes, you're done here. I'll have your final check sent to you." Rachel stood frozen, the reality of his words sinking in. Fired. For buying a burger for an elderly man in need. She could feel her heart pounding as she struggled to keep her composure. Without another word, she gathered her things, fighting back tears as she walked out of the restaurant. The man she'd helped was still sitting in the corner, savoring each bite of his meal, unaware of the price Rachel had just paid for his small moment of relief. As she stepped out onto the sidewalk, the brisk fall air hit her face, grounding her in the moment. Anger and sadness warred within her as she walked, unsure of where to go or what to do next. 2 hours later, as she sat on a park bench, scrolling through her phone and trying to figure out her next move, she noticed something strange. Her social media notifications were blowing up. Messages, likes, comments. Her phone was lighting up like a Christmas tree. Rachel's hands shook as she opened her social media app, unsure of what she would find. The first post at the top of her feed made her heart race. One of the regulars at the McDonald's, a teenage girl who often came in with her friends, had witnessed the entire incident and recorded it on her phone. She'd captured the moment Rachel paid for the man's meal, his look of gratitude, and even part of her tense conversation with Greg. In the caption, the girl had written, "Just saw this girl get fired for buying a meal for an elderly man who couldn't afford it. This is what kindness gets you, apparently. Is this the world we live in? Hashtag stand with Rachel, hashtag compassion matters." Rachel blinked, hardly able to process what she was reading. Hundreds, no thousands, of people had seen the post. Comments flooded in beneath the video. Unbelievable. She should be rewarded, not punished. Is this what we've come to? Firing people for being human. Where is this McDonald's? I'm never going there again. As Rachel scrolled, her shock turned to something almost like disbelief. People were talking about her, rallying behind her, strangers defending her kindness and calling out the injustice she'd faced. With every refresh, more notifications flooded in. Hashtag Stand With Rachel was beginning to trend, her story spreading far beyond her small town. Just as she was about to close the app, a message notification popped up. It was from a local news station. "Hi, Rachel. We saw the video of what happened to you at McDonald's. Would you be interested in sharing your side of the story? Please reach out if you're open to an interview." Rachel stared at the message, her mind racing. Part of her was terrified at the thought of going on television, but another part, the part that had been burning with frustration ever since Greg fired her, wanted to tell her story. She wanted people to know why she'd done what she did, that sometimes a small act of kindness could make all the difference to someone else. She took a deep breath and replied, "Yes, I'd be willing to talk about it." Within minutes, the news station replied, setting up an interview for later that afternoon. They promised to pick her up and bring her to their studio, giving her time to prepare. Rachel felt a mix of nervousness and excitement, but most of all, she felt a strange sense of relief. Maybe sharing her story would help others see that compassion was more than just a weakness in a corporate world obsessed with profit. Later that afternoon, a sleek black van pulled up to her apartment building. Rachel, still in her McDonald's uniform, took one last look in the mirror before heading outside, her heart pounding. This was nothing like her usual day, and she could hardly believe it was happening. The reporter, a kind-looking woman named Sarah, greeted her warmly. As they drove to the studio, Sarah explained how their audience was eager to hear Rachel's perspective. "Your story is resonating with a lot of people," Sarah said. "It seems like people are tired of seeing compassion punished." Rachel nodded, her emotions swirling. "I just did what I thought was right," she said quietly. "I didn't think it would lead to all of this." When they arrived at the studio, Sarah led Rachel to the makeup room, where a team quickly prepared her for the camera. Rachel was struck by how surreal it all felt. The bright lights, the bustling staff, the distant hum of news anchors rehearsing their lines. Finally, she was guided onto the set, where Sarah and the cameraman were waiting. She took a seat in front of the camera, feeling her palms grow damp as the lights bore down on her. "Just be yourself," Sarah whispered with a reassuring smile. The interview began and Sarah guided Rachel through her story, asking about her job, her life, and, finally, what had happened that day at McDonald's. Rachel explained everything: the elderly man, his empty wallet, the way his eyes had lit up when she handed him the meal. "I couldn't just stand there and do nothing," Rachel said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "It was only a burger, but to him it meant so much more. I'd do it again, even if it meant losing my job." Sarah nodded, looking at her with admiration. "Many people feel the same way, Rachel. We've received countless messages from viewers who are moved by your story. Do you have any regrets?" Rachel paused, thinking of the harsh words Greg had spoken to her, the way he dismissed her kindness as if it were a crime. "No," she said finally. "I don't regret helping him. I just wish that kindness didn't come at such a high price." When the interview ended, Sarah thanked Rachel and promised that her story would air that evening. Rachel felt a sense of satisfaction as she left the studio, knowing that she'd shared her truth. Whatever happened next, she'd done what she believed was right. As she walked out of the building, her phone buzzed with a new notification. It was from the same teenage girl who'd posted the video earlier. "You're all over the news. People are talking about starting a petition to get you rehired, or maybe even promoted. Hope you're doing okay. You deserve better than that manager." Rachel smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude for the kindness of strangers. For the first time since she'd lost her job, she felt a glimmer of hope. As Rachel read the message, she felt her heart swell with a mixture of relief and disbelief. The overwhelming support from strangers was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. For so long, she'd kept her head down, working quietly and never expecting anything in return. Now, it felt as if the world was looking directly at her, validating what she had always believed: that kindness should be encouraged, not punished. The evening news aired her story, and by the time it was over, her phone was lighting up with notifications from people all over the country. Messages poured in from old friends, distant relatives, and even people she hadn't spoken to in years. Some offered words of encouragement, while others shared their own stories of workplace injustices and small acts of kindness. The next morning, Rachel woke up to find her story had gone viral. Major news outlets had picked up the story, and #StandWithRachel was now trending nationwide. Videos, articles, and opinion pieces all rallied behind her, questioning corporate policies that prioritized profit over humanity and asking why people like Rachel were punished for doing what was right. One message stood out among the others. It was from a woman named Claire, who introduced herself as the owner of a small, family-owned diner in town. She explained that she had seen Rachel's story on the news and was deeply moved by her kindness. "Rachel, I would be honored if you would consider joining our team at Claire's Diner. We value compassion and integrity, and I believe you would be a wonderful fit. Please let me know if you'd be interested. The position is yours if you want it." Rachel stared at the message in disbelief, rereading it to make sure she wasn't imagining things. After everything that had happened, the idea of working somewhere that valued her kindness felt like a dream. She quickly replied, expressing her gratitude and interest in meeting Claire. Within minutes, Claire responded, inviting her to come by the diner that afternoon. As Rachel got ready, she felt a mix of excitement and nerves. Part of her was still reeling from everything that had happened, and she knew that if she went to work at Claire's Diner, she'd be stepping into a new chapter of her life. But something told her that this was exactly where she was meant to be. When she arrived at the diner, Claire greeted her with a warm smile and a hug. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a welcoming presence, the kind of person who made everyone feel like family. The diner was small and cozy, with booths lining the walls and the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. "Rachel, I'm so happy to meet you," Claire said, her voice full of warmth. "I've been following your story, and I want you to know that we need more people like you in this world." Rachel smiled, feeling a sense of belonging that she hadn't felt in a long time. As they sat down, Claire explained that the diner had been a part of her family for generations. They prided themselves on creating a welcoming atmosphere, one where everyone, from the regulars to those who wandered in just once, was treated with respect and kindness. "Here, we believe that a small act of kindness can make all the difference," Claire said, her eyes twinkling. "It sounds like that's something you understand better than most." Rachel nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. This was exactly the kind of environment she'd always wanted to work in, a place where kindness wasn't just tolerated but celebrated. Claire offered her a position on the spot, and Rachel gladly accepted. As they finalized the details, Rachel realized that, in a strange way, everything she'd been through had led her to this moment. Losing her job at McDonald's had been painful, but it had also opened a door to a place where she could truly be herself. Word spread quickly that Rachel had found a new job at Claire's Diner. People in the community, many of whom had seen the news story, began stopping by the diner to offer their support. Customers left generous tips, some even leaving notes of encouragement for Rachel. Strangers came in just to meet her, thanking her for her kindness and telling her how her story had inspired them. But the ripple effect didn't stop there. Within days, people across the country were sharing their own stories of small acts of kindness. Social media was filled with stories of people paying it forward, helping strangers, and finding ways to make a difference in their communities. Inspired by Rachel's actions, people were creating a movement that celebrated compassion. One afternoon, while Rachel was wiping down tables at the diner, she noticed a familiar face at the door. It was the elderly man she had helped at McDonald's. He looked a bit better this time, his clothes cleaner, and he held a small bouquet of wildflowers in his hands. "Hello, miss," he said, his voice soft but steady. "I just wanted to thank you again. I heard about everything that happened because of that burger you bought me. I never meant for you to lose your job." Rachel smiled, her eyes filling with tears. "It wasn't your fault. If I had to do it all over again, I would. It was worth it." He nodded, his eyes misty. That burger was more than just food to me. It was hope. I had been having a hard time, and that small kindness reminded me that there are good people in this world. It changed something in me." They shared a quiet moment, both moved by the unexpected impact of a single act of kindness. Rachel accepted the flowers, her heart full as she realized that sometimes the smallest gestures could create waves far beyond what anyone could imagine. As weeks passed, Claire's Diner became known as a place of kindness, drawing people from all over who wanted to be part of the movement that Rachel had unknowingly started. Customers shared stories of compassion, and people began leaving donations to help those in need, creating a fund that would provide meals for anyone who couldn't afford them. Rachel's life had changed in ways she never could have predicted. She was no longer just a fast food worker. She was a symbol of kindness, a reminder that one small act could make a difference. Over the next few weeks, Rachel settled into her new role at Claire's Diner, finding a rhythm that felt right. The diner became a second home to her, and she grew close with the regulars, each of whom had their own story to share. Many had heard about her through the news, but it wasn't just the fame that kept them coming back. It was the sense of community and compassion that seemed to thrive in the diner's warm, welcoming atmosphere. Soon, people from other towns and even neighboring states were stopping by Claire's to experience the kindness they'd heard so much about. The diner had transformed into a gathering spot, a place where anyone and everyone felt accepted. Inspired by Rachel's story, customers and staff alike went out of their way to create little moments of kindness, from helping someone with their groceries to buying a meal for a stranger. One particularly busy Friday afternoon, as Rachel rushed to keep up with orders, she noticed a group of people standing outside with signs and banners. Her heart skipped a beat, wondering if something was wrong. But as she squinted through the window, she realized they weren't protesting. They were celebrating. The group held signs that read things like, "Thank you, Rachel," and "Kindness Matters." They cheered and waved as they spotted her through the window, clapping and calling out her name. Claire, who had stepped outside to see what was going on, beckoned Rachel to come out. Blushing and a bit overwhelmed, Rachel walked out to meet the crowd, her hands nervously wringing her apron. As she stepped outside, the group erupted into applause. "We wanted to say thank you," one of the women in the crowd said, holding out a small envelope. "You've inspired so many of us. Your story reminded us of what really matters." Rachel took the envelope, her hands shaking as she opened it. Inside was a collection of handwritten notes, each one filled with words of gratitude and encouragement from people she'd never met. Some were from local families, others from people who had traveled hours to come to the diner. One note read, "I used to think small acts of kindness didn't matter, but you changed that for me. Thank you for reminding us all to be better." Tears welled up in Rachel's eyes as she looked up at the group, speechless. The reality of the impact she'd had on these strangers, on people all over the country, was almost too much to process. All she'd done was buy a burger for someone in need, yet somehow that single act had sparked something much bigger than herself. Over the next few days, the support continued pouring in. People from all walks of life visited the diner, sharing their own stories of kindness and asking Rachel for advice on how they could make a difference. Inspired by her story, communities across the country began organizing kindness days, encouraging everyone to perform small acts of goodwill for strangers. Schools, businesses, and even local governments got involved, creating initiatives that celebrated compassion and empathy. And it didn't end there. Major news outlets and popular social media influencers started picking up the story, amplifying the movement even further. #KindnessMatters became a national hashtag, with thousands of people sharing their own stories of compassion. Rachel's simple act had become a catalyst for change, inspiring people across the country to reconnect with their humanity. One morning, Rachel received a letter from the corporate office of McDonald's. She opened it hesitantly, unsure of what to expect. The letter began with a formal apology, acknowledging the impact of her story and admitting that the firing had been mishandled. They offered her the opportunity to return to her old position, along with a statement that they were working to implement changes in their policies regarding employee discretion for helping those in need. Rachel took a deep breath as she read the letter. She thought back to her time at McDonald's, the strict rules, and the way kindness had been seen as a weakness rather than a strength. She knew the corporate culture wasn't going to change overnight, but maybe, just maybe, her story had planted a seed. She discussed the letter with Claire, who supported her in whatever decision she wanted to make. "Whether you go back or stay here, Rachel, know that we're all behind you," Claire said, giving her a warm smile. "But remember, you've created something special here. You're part of something that's bigger than any one job." After a lot of thought, Rachel decided to decline McDonald's offer. She knew her place was at Claire's Diner, where kindness was valued and people were encouraged to be themselves. She sent a polite response, thanking them for their gesture but explaining that she was committed to continuing her work at the diner, where she could make a difference every day. As the movement continued to grow, Rachel became somewhat of a local hero, though she never let it go to her head. She still showed up to work every morning, greeting each customer with a smile and a kind word, treating every interaction as an opportunity to spread a little more light into the world. Months later, Claire's Diner held a special event to celebrate the anniversary of Rachel's act of kindness. People from all over came to share their stories, bringing donations and helping to create a fund that would support meals for those in need throughout the community. The diner became a beacon of hope and compassion, a place where people came not just to eat, but to feel connected and valued. As Rachel stood among the crowd, listening to people share how her story had impacted them, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She realized that kindness was more powerful than she'd ever imagined. It had the ability to change lives, to bring people together, and to create a ripple effect that stretched far beyond a single act. In the end, Rachel knew she'd found her purpose. She wasn't just a worker at a diner. She was a catalyst for kindness, a reminder that even in a world focused on profit and efficiency, there was still room for compassion. As the months rolled on, Rachel's story continued to have a lasting impact, not only within her town but across the nation. Claire's Diner had become something of a landmark, a place that tourists and locals alike visited to experience the warmth and kindness that had come to define it. The diner's Wall of Kindness initiative had taken off, with customers encouraged to leave notes of compassion, gratitude, or stories of the kindness they'd witnessed or experienced. The wall, a simple corkboard near the entrance, was soon overflowing with colorful sticky notes, letters, and small tokens, each one a testament to the power of human connection. The Wall of Kindness began to attract its own attention. People from nearby communities came to read the stories, leaving behind their own notes and donations. What had started as a simple idea quickly turned into a movement within the diner, inspiring visitors to take those stories of kindness back to their own towns. One afternoon, as Rachel was cleaning tables, she noticed a man standing by the wall, reading each note with intense focus. He wore a well-tailored suit, looking out of place among the diner's usual clientele. Rachel watched as he carefully read the notes, his expression shifting from curiosity to something softer, almost wistful. After a few minutes, he approached the counter, where Rachel was pouring coffee. "Hi," he said, extending his hand, My name's Thomas Carter. I work with a company that provides grants for community-based initiatives. Rachel shook his hand, curious. It's nice to meet you, Thomas. I'm Rachel. How can I help you? Thomas smiled. Actually, it's more about how we might be able to help you. I've been hearing about this diner and the incredible work you've been doing here. The Wall of Kindness, the support fund for meals, it's all truly inspiring. I'd love to discuss a potential partnership to expand your efforts. Imagine having resources to take this movement to other communities, maybe even setting up similar walls of kindness in diners and small businesses across the country. Rachel's eyes widened. That would be incredible. But I never thought this would grow beyond our little town. Thomas chuckled, a warm, genuine sound. Sometimes the best ideas start in the smallest places. And sometimes, all they need is a little help to reach their full potential. Rachel and Thomas spent the next hour discussing ideas, with Claire joining them. They talked about creating a kindness network, a program that would encourage businesses nationwide to adopt their own walls of kindness, host community events, and offer resources for those in need. They envisioned a ripple effect, with each participating business bringing people together, fostering compassion, and building a stronger sense of community. The news spread quickly, and soon, other small businesses began reaching out, eager to join the movement. Claire's Diner became the heart of the initiative, leading by example as they helped others set up their own kindness programs. Local artists volunteered to paint murals on the diner's exterior, featuring messages of hope and compassion. Donations poured in, allowing Rachel and Claire to establish a foundation that supported not only their diner, but also other small businesses that wanted to be part of the kindness network. The diner held workshops and events that brought people together, fostering conversations about empathy, generosity, and the importance of community support. People who had once been strangers became friends as they worked together to build a more compassionate community. Meanwhile, Rachel continued to receive messages from people who had been touched by her story, each one a reminder that her small act of kindness had reached far beyond what she'd ever expected. Families sent letters thanking her for inspiring their children. Teachers shared stories of students who had started their own kindness projects, and communities across the country began organizing events to celebrate acts of compassion. One day, Rachel received a letter from a woman named Linda, who shared that her son had been struggling in school and feeling disconnected. But after seeing Rachel's story, he'd been inspired to start a kindness club at his school. The club had grown rapidly, with students working together to support each other and create positive change. "You helped my son see that kindness is a strength, not a weakness," Linda wrote. "He's happier than I've seen him in years, and he's made so many new friends. Thank you for showing him that even small acts of compassion can make a big difference." Rachel felt a warmth spread through her as she read the letter, realizing that the ripple effect of her actions continued to grow, touching lives she would never even meet. Her story had become a symbol of hope and kindness, inspiring people across generations. As time passed, Rachel and Claire's foundation expanded, providing grants to help struggling families, fund educational programs, and support community projects. The Kindness Network continued to grow, and soon, businesses across the country had their own walls of kindness, each one filled with stories and tokens of compassion. One evening, as Rachel was closing up the diner, she took a moment to look around at the now familiar space. The walls were adorned with pictures of customers, the tables filled with laughter and conversation. The Wall of Kindness stood by the entrance, a colorful tapestry of stories that had grown far beyond what she'd ever imagined. In that moment, she realized that her life had become more meaningful than she'd ever dared to hope. She remembered that first day at McDonald's, the elderly man with his few crumpled bills, and the simple burger that had set everything into motion. It had all started with one small act, an impulse to help someone in need. And now, because of that one act, an entire movement had blossomed, spreading kindness and compassion across the country. Rachel knew that life would always have its challenges, and not every moment would be easy. But as she stood there, looking at the wall of kindness and reflecting on all that had come from her small gesture, she felt a profound sense of purpose. She understood now that kindness wasn't just something she did. It was who she was. And as long as she continued to live by that belief, she knew she would always be making a difference, one small act at a time. For the final event that would cement Rachel's legacy, Claire's Diner decided to host a community celebration, a day of kindness. People from near and far gathered at the diner, each one eager to take part in the movement that Rachel had helped create. There were booths for free food, donations being collected for local charities, and even a kindness corner where people could write messages for the wall of kindness. The turnout was larger than anyone had anticipated. Families, friends, even strangers who'd heard about the event traveled from neighboring towns to be part of something special. It was a day filled with laughter, gratitude, and the shared understanding that small acts could indeed bring people together in powerful ways. As the sun began to set, Claire invited Rachel to the stage. She introduced her not only as a beloved employee but as the heart of the diner's transformation, the one who had turned a simple act of kindness into a national movement. Rachel, overwhelmed and humbled, stepped up to the microphone, her heart full. She looked out over the crowd, taking in the faces of so many people who'd become her family over the past year. "Thank you," she began, her voice wavering with emotion. "Thank you all for being here, for believing in kindness, and for helping us build a community that values compassion. I never imagined that something as small as buying a meal could create all of this." She paused, the memories of that day at McDonald's flooding back. "I did what I thought was right, and because of that, I lost my job. But in losing that job, I found my purpose. I found a place where I could be myself, where kindness isn't just tolerated, it's celebrated. You all have shown me that kindness has power, that it can change lives, and that together we can make the world a little better." The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing across the evening sky. Rachel looked over at Claire, who was smiling proudly, and then out at the wall of kindness, now filled with messages of hope and encouragement from people all over the country. As the applause quieted, Rachel made one last promise. "This isn't the end," she said, her voice strong. "Today might be our official day of kindness, but kindness doesn't have a day. It's something we carry with us, something we can share every day in small, meaningful ways. My hope is that we keep this going, that we continue spreading compassion and kindness in every way we can." The crowd nodded, inspired and moved, and as they left the celebration, each person took a piece of Rachel's message with them, a reminder to look out for one another and to act with kindness, no matter how small the gesture. Rachel stepped down from the stage, surrounded by friends and strangers alike who offered hugs and words of thanks. As the evening came to a close, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had planted seeds of kindness that would continue to grow. In the end, Rachel had discovered a simple but powerful truth. Kindness doesn't need recognition or rewards. It simply needs to be shared. And in that sharing, it becomes a legacy, living on in the hearts of others, spreading hope and compassion to places she would never even see. Her journey, once sparked by a single act, had come full circle. She had become a beacon of kindness, not because of fame or recognition, but because she had lived her values one small, caring act at a time.